U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is back in the United States after a 7-nation tour of Africa. From Kenya to Cape Verde, Clinton spoke of economic progress and good governance, violence and the rule of law. Here with us to analyze the Secretary's trip to Africa is Nii Akuetteh, former Executive Director of Africa Action. Welcome to In Focus.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, good to see you. Now, first up, the Secretary of State is back here, but one thing that jumped off a trip somewhere in Kenya is former, or rather the current Prime Minister, Raila Odinga, saying that African nations do not need lectures about good governance and corruption from Western leaders. What do you think this kind of attitude does to the Africans and also the relationship between such countries?
I would like to believe that the Prime Minister said a lot more than that, and that this is a small part of what it said, and it should be said in context. Because if this is what his whole speech was about, then I think it's unfortunate. Because I think the first thing, in my personal opinion, the first thing Africa needs is democracy and good governance. And we live in an integrated, globalized world, and to get our democracies going, we do need help and support from the major countries, from the Western countries. So I think they do have a say in moving African democracy forward. It cannot be that we just ask them for money, but we say you can't tell us anything about our democracy.
Now, talking about problems, in fact, Secretary Clinton said that as she was going to Africa, she had a problem list for each country. On arrival and observing, she actually noticed that our list was growing bigger and bigger. How should this affect the U.S. Policy towards Africa?
Actually, I think the Secretary and President Obama have made what I think is a good start, but only a start, because they have made Africa a priority early. They have said it. I know these are very good politicians, and you should not ever believe just the words of politicians. Look at their actions. But they have said that Africa is a priority, and when the president was in Ghana, he put democracy top on the list. I like that, but it has to be followed up. So while the list is growing, I specifically think they ought to look at democracy. I think specifically they ought to look at withdrawing support from some of the African dictators who unfortunately have been American allies. They need to withdraw that and put democracy first, because if you can fix the governance, then the growing list of problems can be fixed by Africans themselves. Once they elect their own leaders, once they build institutions, once they have democratic systems.
Yes. Now, the Secretary of State is back in the U.S. What, in your assessment, will be the impact of a 7-nation tour of Africa? I
think it will, the impact opens doors, and it's up to us. I mean, I am an activist here in Washington. I think my colleagues and I, it's up to us to open the doors and walk through the things that she has done, and the president did. We need to move and make sure that the speeches they made are turned into action. If we don't do that, the visit would have lost a lot of opportunities. Now, you know, I was unhappy with how the mainstream media covered the trip, especially so much. We
thought we covered it. It was covered so well. What did we miss?
Well, it was where the emphasis was. I mean, I'm sure VOA did a great job, but the rest of the mainstream media were focusing on her allegedly losing her temper in the DRC. Well, in the DRC, we have 6 million people who have been killed in the war. That has not ended yet. Unfortunately, some American allies were involved in the war, Uganda and Rwanda. That should have been covered. It wasn't covered. Mrs. Clinton herself covered rape as an instrument of war. The media did not focus on that. They chose to focus on her allegedly losing her temper. I was very disappointed, because that's not important in U.S. policy with Africa, whether she loses her temper or not.
Thank you very much for your assessment and your insights. And that's Nii Akuetteh, former Executive Director of Africa Action, and we're happy to have you here.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thank you.